friends. I'm Karen, and this is the Family Food for Moms podcast. We're talking about inspiration for family cooking and dining. Today, we're going to talk about what we can learn from Russia about food and cooking traditions they have. I don't know a lot about Russia, but it's been fascinating researching this because there are such rich culinary and cultural traditions, and I think there's so much we can learn from the way they do things. It's not an easy country to live in because of the extreme cold and other factors, so they've had to learn to make the best of what they have, to adapt. And then they have a long history of aristocratic and imperial traditions, so their cuisine is fascinating. Also, it reflects the diversity of its regions because it's such a vast country. The northern coast is well known for its fish dishes, and then Siberia for the meat-heavy meals. The food varies greatly depending on where you go in Russia. The first thing I think is valuable is the local sourcing and in-season produce that they use. Obviously, the things that are in season change dramatically. So spring and summer, there'll be greens and berries, fresh fish, and then light dishes like borscht with young beetroots and herbs are made. Then in the cold winter months, there would be heavier, hearty, luxurious meals with ingredients that have been preserved, like pickles, dried mushrooms, smoked fish. Mushrooms are a key ingredient in Russian fine dining. So they find the wild varieties and preserve them and then use them in soups and sauces and side dishes. So in the warmer seasons, they'll use fresh food that they source. And then in the winter, they'll often have to rely on preserved and stored foods. So they would be able to store root vegetables, beetroots, potatoes, etc. And then they'd be able to preserve foods, as I mentioned, for use in the winter. Preservation techniques are deeply ingrained in the culture. So pickled vegetables like cucumbers, cabbage, and tomatoes are staples, especially in the winter. Fermented foods like sauerkraut and kvass is a fermented drink made from rye bread. These are also good for digestion. And then smoking and curing, whether it's fish or meat or even cheese, to extend its shelf life, and also to add those rich, bold flavors that Russian food is known for. So Russian dishes often have depth of flavor as well as bold flavors. The depth of flavor is obtained through slow cooking, adding lots of layers of ingredients, and then cooking them for long periods to get that good depth of flavor. Also, they want their dishes to be hearty, comforting, rich, especially through the cold winters. The best kinds of comfort foods are necessary. So borscht, the famous beet soup, has countless variations, but it's an amazing way to balance sweet, sour, and savory flavors. It's made with a meat stock and then fermented beet juice and then finished with sour cream. Sounds delicious. Beef stroganoff is another one that's quite familiar to us. It layers the flavors from the beef, the mushrooms, the onions, and then the creamy sauce. And then I'm not sure how to say this, pierogi, small pastries filled with meats, cabbages, or potatoes. These are a good example of taking humble ingredients and elevating them to something amazing. So often Russian cuisine involves layering of flavors with a focus on creating that depth of flavor. So then onions are used, garlic, dill, other herbs, slow cooking techniques to develop the flavor, and then building the complexity in the dish with the balance of flavors. This food will help to sustain the people through the long cold winters. We can learn the value of creating food that's satisfying, both in taste and in the way it nourishes our bodies. People rely on hearty, starchy foods to fill them, and also the ingredients can be stored for long periods. So the potato is central in many dishes, from mashed potatoes to potato pancakes like draniki. Then buckwheat, or called grechka, is another staple. It's served with butter as a side dish or as a base for casseroles and soup. So that would simply be cooked buckwheat. Then I've mentioned root vegetables. So carrots, beets, onions are central to many dishes, bringing that bit of sweetness and heartiness to meals. So sour and tart, strong flavors. Russian cooking is known for incorporating all of these things to create the bold, the sour, the tangy flavors into their cooking. Sour cream is known as smetana, is a key ingredient, adding richness to everything from soups to pancakes. And then tart berries like cranberries and something called lingonberries are often used in sauces or jams and even drinks. And then the rye bread, something called the Borodinsky bread, is a hallmark of Russian cuisine, and that's a sour rye bread. So bread culture. Russians have a deep appreciation for bread, especially rye bread, and it's often served with every meal as a base for a sandwich or to dip into a soup. It helps to supplement the meal and add some good carbohydrates to satisfy you. So it pairs well with a lot of things. They also like to make kefir from milk as a ferment. Russian people are known for taking simple ingredients and making really tasty, complex dishes. For example, schi, cabbage soup, might seem like just a basic soup, but it's cooked with all these layers of flavor and even pickled foods, the pickled cabbage, so it makes it a really full-bodied flavor. So complex sauces and stocks are used in most dishes, and of course these are so healthy for us. If they're slow cooked, any meat stock is going to be good for the gut. So there's always a strong emphasis on these, and they can be quite labor intensive, but I think there'll always be a stock pot simmering on the stove so that you can easily access that when you need it. So it becomes part of life. And I really like that idea. Then it's not a lot of work because it's something along the way, like making sourdough. You always are feeding the starter. So with your stock, you're always feeding the stock pot with bones and vegetables and then slow cooking it, and then you just always have stock available. So making the most of whatever's available is a valuable lesson we can learn from Russian cuisine. We can learn to be resourceful in the kitchen. If we don't have a specific ingredient or two from a recipe, we can learn what will work just as well. And then making the most of what we do find in our pantries and using up things that are in our fridges or in the grocery cupboard, anything that needs to be used, and then learning how to make a stew or a soup from those things with the bone broth or stock, making it into a really nutritious and yummy meal. In Russian fine dining, they also are really good at plating and presentation of food. Dishes are often beautifully arranged, showing off the different colors and textures. Sophisticated food. So garnishes are used thoughtfully from vegetables like beets or carrots or cucumbers. They'll be finely carved or arranged to add elegance. And then contrasting colors like the red beets and the pale sour cream or the golden potatoes. So they like to take pride in the way they present their dishes. Then one of the most significant parts of Russian cooking and eating is the family meals, the traditions that are passed down, the gatherings, the hospitality, and communal meals. Russian cuisine is deeply connected to tradition, with recipes passed down through the generations. Dishes like pirotsky is small stuffed pies, blini, thin pancakes. These carry cultural significance, and preparing them is a way of honoring family heritage. And the recipes will always be taught from grandmothers and mothers to granddaughters and sons even. So understanding food traditions from your culture and preserving the recipes that connect you to your past, it's a very valuable pastime. I know people who have a scrapbook of old recipes or a beautiful box that they keep them in that's valuable, and they have some of the best things in there. My mom and dad passed down a homemade ice cream recipe, a Christmas cake that is alcohol free, and a recipe for crunchies. That's a kind of cookie with oats. Just amazing, unusual things like that connect us to our past. Ooh, and one of my favorites, a passion fruit sponge cake with passion fruit in the frosting on top. It's amazing. There's a tradition of tea drinking, or chai, which is often accompanied by small savory bites, which is a ritual in Russia. And then communal gatherings with shared meals. They have a concept called zakuski, small appetizers before a main meal. So that brings variety to the meal, the pleasure of sampling many different flavors. Perhaps you'll be standing for this part of the meal or at the table, but there's a lot of time for connection, for conversation, just to enjoy each other's company while you taste the appetizers. Guests are always treated with great generosity, and often there's a large amount of food with food left over. There's great enjoyment of enjoying the food together. Food in Russia plays a central role in family gatherings, with elaborate meals involving multiple courses, and even the cooking part is often a communal activity and a chance to bond with family and friends. So it'll be a slow meal, it'll be time in between to help with preparation, it'll be everybody pitching in together and then enjoying it together. Often the zakuski can go on for hours. There'll be appetizers like herring, cold cuts, cheeses, pickles, with drinks and laughter along the way. From Russian cooking, we can appreciate the value of preservation, seasonal ingredients, communal dining, rich, deep flavors, comfort food, simple ingredients, and special shared meal times. If you're interested in cooking Russian dishes, experiment with ingredients like sour cream and how you can use it, dill and beets, and then the root vegetables and the stocks. So the idea is to cook slowly and let the flavors develop, and then enjoy the meals with your loved ones. Thanks for listening. I hope you get to cook something inspired by this, and I'll see you next time.